Hi there, folks. Welcome to the program. This, of course, is Stinchfield, the podcast. So great to be along with you. I'm fascinated by all of this JFK stuff that is being released. I'm looking at a lot of it, and the information I'm getting is most of this stuff has already been released. Much of it was redacted the first time it was released, so we're learning more and more about it. But it is interesting. Everything seems to point back to the CIA. Now, you've got the situation with Israel. You've got a situation with Russia. You've got the United States of America, what was, I believe, the beginnings of the deep state then, working against John F. Kennedy Jr., who was out to expose a globalist agenda. Now, whether or not they called it a globalist agenda back then, I don't know. But it was a one world order that was operating at a very high level, conspiring against people who love freedom. And for whatever you say about JFK, he loved freedom. John F. Kennedy was a president that I believe was there to push back against tyrannical forces. He was pushing back against the globalists. And I've got audio that I found of a speech JFK gave. And I think this speech is one of the reasons why the CIA went after him and killed him. We now have confirmed connections from Lee Harvey Oswald to the CIA. There are some Russian connections, and it is also very interesting. In many of these documents, one of the groups that was redacted all the time was Israel. And so now they unredact Israel. I haven't seen the connection that Israel was behind the assassination, but for whatever reason, the CIA did not want you to see documents that had Israel in it. We're going to talk a lot about this. I'm going to play for you the audio of John F. Kennedy, a speech he gave, which could be given today. It's eye-popping. It's prophetic from when he gave it, and I believe it may have led to his death. So this I don't know if it's newly unearthed, but I found it. So it's new to me, right? Like as they used to say back on prime time for NBC. It's new to me. Stinchfield 1776 is the website. Let me remind you all, folks, that I want you to pay a visit to Patriot Mobile. Before we start the program off, I have a Patriot Mobile phone. I love this phone, 972-PATRIOT. It's not my number. It's Patriot Mobile's number, 972-PATRIOT, 972-PATRIOT. They are the quintessential company when I talk about a parallel economy. They're America's only Christian conservative wireless provider, 100% U.S.-based. All the customer service is here. You pick which network you want to be on. In fact, you can have two networks on one phone. That is something no other cell phone company can do. So you're not going to have to worry about sacrificing your cell service, but you will know you're with a company that supports people like me. Many of my conservative friends are sponsored by Patriot Mobile. They're everywhere you go. Support companies that are helping move America forward, and you will like your cell phone service better. I promise you. PatriotMobile.com/Grant. Use the promo code GRANT for a free month service. I ask you this all the time, but you might as well do it because there's no reason not to switch. PatriotMobile.com/Grant, or just call them 972-PATRIOT and tell them Grant Stinchfield sent you. All right, let's get her started.
Uncensored and unapologetic. This is Stinchfield. Here's your host, Grant Stinchfield.
All right, it is great to be along with you. I pulled a few of these documents. They're going to be hard for you to read on the screen, but I figured I'd go through them with you. This is one of the documents that had the brackets around Israel. That was telling people before they released to redact that from the document, and it was in previous documents. You had a lot of talk of Israel in these documents. Here's another one talking about Israel. I'll read it to you. In the way of background, the control file was created to give us the opportunity of closely monitoring our liaison with Angleton on a variety of matters which were not reported through normal CIA channels. CIA directors permitted Angleton to run several intelligence progress, many of them with the Israeli intelligence service, and that was supposed to be redacted. They did not want you to know that they were working with Israeli intelligence. That was the last thing they wanted you to know, folks, which was very, very interesting. There's other documents I want to go through here. One is about Gary Underhill. This is also talking about the CIA. And I'll read this to you. The day after the assassination, Gary Underhill left Washington in a hurry. Late in the evening, he showed up at the home of friends in New Jersey. He was very agitated. A small clique within the CIA was responsible for the assassination, he confided, and he was afraid for his life and probably would have to leave the country. Less than 6 months later, Underhill was found shot to death in his Washington apartment. The coroner ruled it a suicide. Yeah, right. Give me a break. Now, that letter is another example of one that had been released. You go further on in there, they released the names of some individuals who he was talking to, which we didn't know who they were. We do now. I've got an interview I did with a JFK expert that I'm going to air for you in a little bit. But before we air that interview, I want to get to this video of JFK, audio really is what it is, of JFK and how unbelievably prophetic it was. I think that's a good way to explain it. This is a guy who was pushing back against the global elite. He knew they were a problem. He knew the United States was pushing back against Russia and Cuba at the time. All of this was playing in on a global scale, and I think in the end, this is what got him killed. I'm going to play it for you, and we can start and stop it, but I might just play it in full. We'll see how I feel.
Ladies and gentlemen, the very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control. And no official of my administration, whether his rank is high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes, or to withhold from the press and the public the facts they deserve to know. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice, on guerrillas by night instead of armies by day. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations.
So I'm going to play some more of this, but I want to go through some of what he's saying. It's really quite unbelievable. When you think about what John F. Kennedy was talking about, was about the censorship on not just the news, holding information back from you. That's what he's talking about. There wasn't social media around then, but if there was, he'd be talking about social media here too, because it was about the control of information. So it wasn't that somehow the news media was going to be censored. It was that the media was going to censor the information from getting to you, and they probably were going to do it at the behest of the government. He talks about a, quote, monolithic and ruthless conspiracy. What do you think we face right now? Nothing short of a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that only President Trump has had the cojones to stand up to and say enough is enough and push back against this monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that runs deep into our federal government. He's talking about the deep state. And this is going back into the 1960s. And John F. Kennedy knew the deep state was real. A ruling class of bureaucrats. This bureaucracy that controlled the flow of information, controlled the power. And it spread beyond the borders of the United States of America. And I think JFK was making that very, very clear when he says, we now have a system that relies on infiltration and subversion and intimidation, not choice. What do you think we face today? Infiltration and subversion. They try to subvert us every step of the way. The infiltration, all you have to do is go back to President Trump's campaign and you look at the FISA warrants and you look at the spying on President Trump. Everything they did there. Intimidation. They're threatening to throw Trump supporters, not just his close confidants, but people like you and me in prison. They did to the J6ers. This is what intimidation was about. And it wasn't just about throwing a J6er in prison to intimidate him or punish him. It was about throwing them in prison so you would be intimidated, so you don't speak up. And this is what JFK was calling out in the 1960s. And the deep state, the bureaucrats were having none of it. And I believe the CIA orchestrated this plot to kill John F. Kennedy because he was getting too close to upending the money grab and power grab that we call the Washington elite.
Its preparations are concealed, not published. Its mistakes are buried, not headlined. Its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no rumor is printed, no secret is revealed. No president should fear public scrutiny of his program, for from that scrutiny comes understanding, and from that understanding comes support or opposition, and both are necessary. I am not asking your newspapers to support an administration, but I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. For I have complete confidence.
So he gets an applause there. Now he's talking to the newspapers. And he had a very important point where he said dissenters should not be silenced, but praised. Now, there's a certain way to dissent. Certainly, I think what Trump supporters were doing during the 4 years of Joe Biden was the way you dissent. We used our voices. We used our platforms. We turned to social media. We did everything we could to raise awareness of the evil doing that the Democrats and the deep state were engaged in. Now, he says a presidential administration needs support and opposition. Both are necessary to the success of a country. Both support and opposition. Now, you know that I would go to the end of the earth for President Trump. I believe so strongly in what he is doing to save this nation that I would do whatever it takes to make sure he's successful. That includes speaking up if I disagree with him on something. And there are certain things that I disagree with him. I've raised my concerns about tariffs, but I've also said I'm giving him great leeway because he's been right on everything. I'm not going to question him here until this plays out. I think the more I research this Alien Enemies Act of 17 whatever, I think President Trump may not have even needed it. I think he has complete power to decide who stays in the country, who doesn't, especially if you came here illegally and you don't have a visa. You don't have a visa, you don't have any rights in America, okay? So he can deport you without any kind of a court hearing, anything. He has those rights. I don't think he needed to use the Alien Invasion Act. I think he could have just done it by using the law. Then he brings the courts into it. But maybe he wanted to bring the courts into it. Maybe he's forcing the hand here of the Supreme Court to rule on something like this. See, President Trump and his team are always one step ahead of how you would think about things. So This is what I'm looking at. But it doesn't mean I don't push back or disagree, because as John F. Kennedy says, both are essential, support and opposition. Make no mistake about that. I'm going to play more of him here. Listen.
And the response and dedication of our citizens, whenever they are fully informed. I not only could not stifle controversy among your readers, I welcome it. This administration intends to be candid about its errors. For as a wise man once said, an error doesn't become a mistake until you refuse to correct it. We intend to accept full responsibility for our errors, and we expect you to point them out when we miss them. Without debate, without criticism, no administration and no country can succeed, and no republic can survive. That is why the Athenian lawmaker Solon decreed it a crime for any citizen to shrink from controversy. And that is why our press was protected by the First Amendment, the only business in America specifically protected by the Constitution, not primarily to amuse and entertain, not to emphasize the trivial and the sentimental, not to simply give the public what it wants, but to inform, to arouse, to reflect, to state our dangers and our opportunities, to indicate our crises and our choices, to lead, mold, educate, and sometimes even anger public opinion.
So I love what he says about the media. I never thought about this. The media is the only constitutionally protected industry. Auto industry isn't protected. Steel industry isn't protected. But the media is constitutionally protected in the First Amendment because it's so important. And he specifically says, John F. Kennedy does, that without debate and criticism, no country can survive. But what did the Democrats do? They shut down debate. They shut down criticism. They knocked us off social media. Heck, Facebook just yesterday knocked me off. I'm shocked they haven't done it yet. If you're watching on Facebook, thank you. I don't know if you were on yesterday when they literally cut me off in the middle of my live stream. That's the opposite of what John F. Kennedy wanted from this nation and purveyors of information. And yes, Facebook is a purveyor of information. And I believe they're responsible for all of it. If they want the protections, if they're going to start censoring stuff, then they're responsible for everything on that platform. As I'm looking here, Naomi Sorenstall on Facebook writes, "Hi, Naomi. Hi, Grant. You always have a good program. The judges and the Democrats are evil and satanic and demonic. I always believed the CIA was involved in JFK murder and Johnson was involved. I worry very concerned what judges and the Democrats will do to President Trump, Vice President Vance, and Elon." That's what this podcast really is about. We know now, or we believe, what they were capable of doing to John F. Kennedy. I would assume they most certainly are capable of doing that to President Trump, which is why I've said over and over again, he's got to surround himself with people on his security detail, not only that he can trust, but that are insulated from this cabal of deep state insiders, this monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that John F. Kennedy talks about.
This means greater coverage and analysis of international news, for it is no longer far away and foreign, but close at hand and local. It means greater attention to improved understanding of the news, as well as improved transmission. And it means, finally, that government at all levels must meet its obligation to provide you with the fullest possible information outside the narrowest limits of national security. And so it is to the printing press, to the recorder of man's deeds, the keeper of his conscience, the courier of his news, that we look for strength and assistance, confident that with your help, man will be what he was born to be, free and independent.
Amen to that. Government at all levels must provide you with the information except for the small constraints of national security. Government at all levels must do that. Did we get that during COVID? No. This government is so far has strayed from what John F. Kennedy envisioned the government to be. I think today he'd be a moderate Republican. Moderate at best. He may even be a conservative. Democrat Party left John F. Kennedy a long time ago. They don't represent those words because do not ever forget it was the Democrats, along with the mainstream media, along with the big tech oligarchs, that did everything John F. Kennedy was just speaking about that should not be done. Everything. It's an amazing speech. I'm glad we found it because he predicts an awful lot. Let me tell you about my friends over at get20now.com. This is about getting 20% of your investment, 20% interest annualized, paid out monthly. Now, I have invested with this company, NFN8. This is about investing in Bitcoin mining equipment. They've got industrialized warehouses across the country. They buy the electricity at rates. I was shocked. I went through all this with them. I don't know how they're getting the electricity so cheap, which allows them to mine Bitcoin at a very inexpensive price. This allows them to pay you up to 20% on your investment, contractually guaranteed, and it is paid out monthly. They've lived up to all their promises to me. I get my check direct deposited into my account every month. I don't have the headache of overhead, employees, and all that stuff, and I'm getting 20%. I'm looking at the stock market going wild, and I love knowing that at NFN8, get20now.com, I'm locked in. Every month, like clockwork, it gets deposited. And in fact, I'm thinking about investing more with them. I really am, because you know what? 20%, up to 20%, depending on the deal you make, can't be beat. So again, up to 20% annualized income, paid monthly, mailbox money, baby. That's what it is. Get to them. Get20now.com. Call them back if they call you. Better yet, answer the phone. You're going to want to talk to these guys about it, and they're good guys, too. I know them personally. All right. So that was JFK and laying it out for us. Now, what about this idea of the CIA? Michael Flynn, who's become a friend of mine, went on with Benny Johnson.
Yeah, Mike Pompeo. Why did Mike Pompeo want to release these? What we're looking at is an organization, the CIA, that is so rogue. The CIA is the fourth branch of government. The deep state is what forms around the CIA. And the CIA has infiltrated the White House. They've infiltrated every single staff in the House and the Congress. So when Miss Luna and other members of like the HIPSI or the SISI or the SASC or the HASC or the HAC or the SAC, all these different acronyms, right? Inside of those organizations, inside of those staffs, in the legislative branch, never mind in the judicial branch, there are elements of the intelligence community that have been in there for a long, long time. They just flow in and out, and some of them are what they call legacy people. So we've got to take this very seriously. This is not, finally the JFK things are, the files are released, and then, Sunday night or Saturday night, we're bombing the Houthis again, and everybody forgets about the JFK files. An organization of the United States government called the Central Intelligence Agency committed what we now know, this act of criminal conspiracy to not just undermine a president of the United States, but to assassinate a president of the United States. We have got to accept that or not. People can say, but I accept that. So now it is, what are we going to do about it? So maybe we waited, whatever it is, 75 years or something. I'm not a math major, but we waited this long. Okay. So these people are all dead and gone. Underhill supposedly put a bullet behind his head and shot him, and committed suicide. What is going to happen? Accountability. Everybody is held to account. Children are held to account by their parents.
So the question then becomes, will there be any accountability for what happened to JFK? It sure looks like the CIA is responsible. Okay, that Underhill paper that he just referenced. Again, he talks about Underhill going to a home in New Jersey of his friends and basically said he was afraid for his life that, quote, a small clique within the CIA was responsible for the assassination. He later ends up dead. Now, you're telling me that's a coincidence? There's no way. But again, we knew about those Underhill documents. This is an interview I did with a gentleman by the name of Mr. Hancock, I believe. Larry Hancock is his name. And he wrote a book about the Oswald puzzle. And I talked to him about the release of the documents and where they stand. I want to play this interview with you. I found the interview to be fascinating, so I'm going to play it from my Real America's Voice show for you. Check this out. So far, how does it relate to your theory about what happened that day?
Sure. And you just mentioned the Underhill document. Actually, a lot of the documents we're seeing now, matter of fact, all the documents we've seen so far, hundreds, thousands of pages, are documents that were already in the JFK collection at the National Archives. They'd already been released. The thing is that many of them were heavily redacted. So we can see things now that we couldn't see before. Again, many of them are familiar with it to us. I wrote about Underhill and his consulting on weapons purchases, covert weapons shipments, and book that back in 2006. So I'm very familiar with Underhill. This helps me see a little bit more about him. But what I can tell you is we now know that the people that he was very suspicious with was a man named Henry Heckscher and a man named Carl Jenkins, who were working in a brand new CIA project called AmWorld. And that project was to use Cuban exiles offshore to overthrow the Castro regime. Underhill had tracked weapon spies that they were bringing in for this project from Europe, and he revealed these guys because he stated the fact that he knew that they had just come from Southeast Asia, where they had actually been involved in areas related to drug trafficking in the Golden Triangle. So the good news is we have enough information that we can connect those sorts of dots now.
All right, so what does that mean? I mean, I hear you talking about Cuba. Then I hear talking about Russia. We got the CIA, the KGB. We got drugs involved. We have all of these things. You could throw Israel in there. I've heard talk about that as well. What should we take away from this? Do you have any new thoughts from the information you're garnering now? Or what do you want people to think about the JFK assassination?
I think there are a couple of things. In the due documents, we're seeing more indication, for example, that Oswald was a lone actor in terms of not being employed by the CIA, not being a CIA asset. A document I saw last night for the first time revealed the fact that the CIA was mystified by how he had gotten into Russia. They were very concerned that he'd gotten in through Helsinki. They didn't know, they weren't tracking him. They were also very concerned that he'd come back with a Russian wife, which gives us a very good indicator that although some had speculated he went in under CIA control, that no, he didn't, or the CIA wouldn't have been trying to figure out what was going on. So we do have evidence that helps us with that sort of thing. What we don't have, and I think what I've got to stress, is these are documents that were collected decades ago, and they've been at the National Archives. Many of the documents I saw last night have been released 4 and 5 times already. We've looked at them. So the best that we are seeing is new bits and pieces of information, in a couple of cases, whole documents that were unredacted now that were redacted before. But what's got to be stressed is that what we've learned is if we want the real truth, we've got to get new information, because the information we needed back then was withheld by the CIA. We now know that happened.
We've heard about this 2,400 pages that was found at the FBI. Was that part of the release? And then I'm a firm believer that anything that would have been really a smoking gun, whether you call it the deep state, whether you call it the elite, whoever, that was destroyed long ago, in my opinion. Larry, yours?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with you. For example, we have discovered documents and interviews that tell us that the CIA actually was concerned enough back in 1964 immediately after the assassination to investigate their own people, their own anti-Cuban operation out of JM Wave in Miami, CIA operations officers running missions into Cuba, and the Cuban exiles, the whole Cuba connection. We know that they lied to the Warren Commission and the House Select Committee, saying they'd never done that kind of investigation. But we now even know the questions that were asked and that a report was compiled and the report was never submitted. So I'm in agreement with you. My suspicion is they've found something that they didn't want to, that they couldn't share, and it's long gone. I don't think we'll find that. There are other things that we could find, but yeah, I agree with you. Anything that was that explosive stayed in a soft file or stayed somewhere else, didn't go into the investigation.
All right, you've got a book you've written extensively on this, the Oswald puzzle. I'm going to ask you a last question, if you can, fairly quickly. Do you have a theory? Do you think the Warren Commission was right and he totally acted alone? Do you think the CIA was involved? Do you think it was the mob? Do you think it was Russia? What is your theory, if you can, real quick? I got a whole book on it, so that's a tough question to ask you.
Oswald was totally a patsy. He was set up as a patsy to point towards Cuba because the team that assassinated JFK was eliminating him before he could begin negotiations with Fidel to take Cuba neutral and get the Russians out. They had to eliminate JFK to stop that from happening. It was supposed to happen in November. They had already met Oswald. They killed the president and attempted to frame Oswald to point to Cuba because that investigation was suppressed. It didn't work.
When you say who's the who?
It was a team of CIA field officers out of JM Wave in Miami who'd been trying to kill Castro for 3 years and overthrow a regime with the anti-Castro Cuban exile paramilitary team that they had been working with. They were told from Washington that it was all going to be over. Fidel had approached JFK. They were beginning negotiations, and they were not going to ever go home if something didn't happen and happen quickly.
Wow. Fascinating stuff. And I appreciate you coming on. We could probably do hours and hours on this. But as more documents are released, please, Larry, keep us posted. If you find anything, I'll bring you right back on. All right? We have a deal?
Will do. I could keep digging for 30 years and more.
I don't expect you to stop. Larry Hancock, thank you so much. We appreciate it. All right, so I like that guy. I really do, and I think you could literally do hours with somebody like that, and there's a lot of people like that have looked into this stuff. It'll be fascinating over the coming days as some of these citizen investigators go through these documents, what they actually find from the JFK files. It'll be very interesting, to say the least. Hey, folks, I want to tell you about my friends over at Energized Health. EnergizedHealth.com has helped me so much. I lost 15 pounds in just 2 weeks when I started this Energized Health program. It's about intercellular hydration. If you don't know what that is, it's not just about pounding water. Intercellular hydration. Go to energizedhealth.com/grant. Whether you want to lose 15 pounds like me and tighten it up, or you want to lose 200-300 pounds, Energized Health can help you. And it's not about drugs. It's about coming up with a way. And this is really a protocol that nobody else is doing. And it works so good. And I'm just going to say it. I don't ever like to say things are easy because I think it's a cop-out. Because it does take dedication. But this is easy. It was easy. You can't call it a diet. I changed the way I ate a little bit, but it's not a diet. And I can't say I killed myself working out. I did some things they asked me to do when it comes to the workout front, but it wasn't like I'm doing Navy SEAL stuff. So I urge you, go to energizedhealth.com. If you want to get right with yourself, get your life back, get hydrated at a cellular level, go to energizedhealth.com/grant. There's a master class about intercellular hydration. Take it, and you're going to see you're going to love these people, and they're going to help you take your life back from a physical, mind, body, soul perspective. EnergizedHealth.com/grant. Pay them a visit today. All right, so JFK, the whole thing was really, honestly, pretty fascinating. I want to talk a little bit about Doge and what Elon Musk is doing. We now know that he's cut literally billions of dollars. The left doesn't want you to believe it. They say somehow, oh, no, he's not actually cutting anything. Courts have stopped him. I don't understand why they don't want him to be successful in this. Literally what they're cutting is waste, fraud, and abuse. Nonsensical programs that the American taxpayer shouldn't be paying for. Now, the left is against this. Somehow they think everyday people are being harmed. They're not. And here's how I know that the left is deranged. Not only are they burning down the Teslas, we talked about that yesterday, the Tesla dealerships, but they talked about this in the past. You want to see Mark Cuban? I actually know this guy personally. He's not a bad guy. I think he's moved further to the left than when he said this in 2017. But what he said in 2017 is exactly what Elon's doing today. Why do they hate him? Because the gravy train is up. The jig is up. Here's Mark Cuban, 2017, throwback.
As a libertarian, I think we can reduce employment in government by at least a third, reduce the overhead and administration by that much or more, so that...
Wait, decrease the size of employment in government by a third, okay? 33%. Well, I think Elon Musk is right there with you, Mark.
We can offer more to services for our citizens. And so if when it comes down to it, where I tend to disagree with everybody, and this is the libertarian in me, I'm happy to push down the size of government, and I'm happy to work on making government more efficient.
Do you think it's efficient to pay millions of dollars to have men circumcised in Mozambique? Is it efficient to spend millions of dollars to have mice try to transgenderize them and then study transgender mice? No, that is not helping the American people, which is literally what Mark Cuban is talking about here. So why is he so upset now? Why is the rest of the left so upset now? Maybe it's because they didn't do it. And I know the people like Elizabeth Warren and the Chuck Schumers of the world and the Nancy Pelosi's of the world know that their gravy train being funneled through all of these nonprofits, it's going to end.
Because then more money can pass through and help the people who need it. And that's what needs to change.
But not everybody is so smart. This is Michael Lewis. He's a great author, but he gets it so wrong. He's on with CNN, and he's talking about how hard it is to commit fraud within the government. It's not hard at all, man. I'm going to play this clip for you, and then we're going to debunk it, okay? This is why CNN is worthless.
When people throw around insults about the federal bureaucrats, they're really revealing they don't know what goes on in the federal government. It's a mind-bendingly complicated place. It's doing lots of different things, some of them very well and some of them less well. When you go in, one of the things you notice is how hard fraud would be to perpetrate. Waste is different. Waste is a little complicated. And there are all sorts of inefficiencies that are not really the fault of the workers. It's more the fault of the structure of the system. But like you can't take a federal worker to lunch and buy them a turkey sandwich. They just won't take the money. They're watched every which way, and they're just conditioned to be very, very careful about what they do financially. And like if you said to me, Michael, you got to go write a story about fraud, I would much rather go look for it in a private company. Much more likely to find it.
You think it's easier to find fraud in a private company than in the civil service?
Oh yeah.
Hey, Ding Dong. Look, he wrote a book. What was it called? They popped it up here. The name of the book was Who is Government? The Untold Story of Public Service. You want to know my guess? I believe this Michael Lewis was paid to write that book, and he was paid by Democrats, or he was paid by a union to write that book. I would be willing to bet a lot of money on that. Somebody paid him to write that book. It wasn't a book he just came up with and decided to write. They paid him to write it, and it's a propaganda piece. Now, as for more fraud in government versus private companies, you know what? Human beings are not really that great. They aren't. We have criminals at every level. We have criminals inside government. We have criminals inside private companies. We have people willing to steal. Believe me, I ran street style businesses, whether it was my auto care business, whether it was trucking companies. The trucking company was nearly impossible to steal from. But the oil change business that I ran, I had employees steal from me all the time. That's fraud. You better believe there's fraud inside private companies. But you don't think there's fraud inside government? Just the sheer fact of how often is a Department of Transportation worker taking sand or salt off the lot and using it for his own house, or maybe taking it and, God forbid, using it to sand and salt somebody else's driveway and getting paid for it. That at the smallest levels. He's talking about you can't buy a government employee a turkey sandwich. That's not the kind of fraud we're talking about. We're talking about the kind of fraud where you have your wife run a nonprofit. Just look at Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, and his wife. And then you have the Department of Education in California pay that nonprofit that's being run by the wife of the governor millions of dollars for her to produce nonsensical movies. And what do? You've now enriched and lined the pockets of government officials' family members by washing the money through a nonprofit. That's just one example, and that is going on. Now, you can look at government contracts. You can look at Nancy Pelosi and her husband and the government contracts that her husband has created overseas through her contacts. Look at Joe Biden using his position of power to enrich himself. When you think about the money going through these NGOs and where the money ultimately ends back, this is a huge issue of fraud. If you don't think, Michael Lewis, that fraud can be committed by government officials, I don't think you did a very good job studying for your book, because every single city I've worked in, let's go through them: Missoula, Montana, Fort Myers, Florida, Hartford, Connecticut, New York City, Dallas, Texas, all those at a local level. Every single city I've worked in. Oh, let's add Los Angeles to the mix too, where I do morning drive radio now. Every single city, there was a public corruption case that was offered up and won by the federal government in every single city I worked in. So don't tell me that it's not easy to commit fraud with inside government entities. It most certainly is, but this is how dumb they really are. It's maddening. Maddening, though, don't I? All right, let me tell you, folks, about my friend's company. This, where is it? Nope, that's not it. Let me see here. Here it is. The Wellness Company. TWC.health/grant. You know, I always keep my handy dandy kits here so I can show them to you because I think they're so cool. This one is my favorite. It's the Field Kit. Waterproof. It's got an EpiPen in here, guidebook, steroids, ivermectin, antibiotics, amoxicillin. I can't name them all. As you can see, there's too many. All made out to me. This is the EpiPen that's in here. This could really save a life. Imagine you have a son or daughter who has a friend over allergic to bee stings. You got an EpiPen in there. That's going to be life-saving. So this kit I love. Which is this one. I love this one too. TWC.health/grant. This one's a little smaller, but I do think it's a must for every single household. Okay? These are prescription medications. Again, same thing. Ivermectin in here. Antivirals, antiparasitics. You name it. Antibiotics, of course. This is going to be the most essential to possibly save a life if, God forbid, there's a natural disaster. Drugstores aren't open. You can't get to a doctor. Can't get to a drugstore. There's a drug shortage, which we know happens. So, again, TWC.health/grant. Use the promo code GRANT for 10% off, and your family will be much, much safer for it. Okay, folks? Very, very true here. Am I freezing up here? What's going on? All right, let's see here. All right, let me play a clip of President Trump. I loved this from President Trump. This was him with Laura Ingraham giving a tour of the Oval Office.
So Reagan has a place of prominence, and George Washington has a place of prominence. And I've asked this question maybe 200 times. People come in. I said, so who would you put in the place of prominence, George Washington or Ronald Reagan? Who would you put?
Washington.
So far, it's 219-0. And they like Reagan.
Oh, I love Reagan.
But here's what they like more than anything. So this is the Declaration of Independence.
Wow.
And they ask that this be done. It's never been up. It's been in the vaults for many, many decades. And they said, we have to do something like drapes or something because the light eventually affects it. And it's very cool.
Oh, my gosh.
Isn't that great? Just went up yesterday.
Wow.
Think Joe Biden would do this? I don't think so. Do you think he'd think of it? Do you think he knows what it is?
Wow.
No, but look at it. So, but this was, none of these pictures were up. Oh, you know, very few. It's like very little. And it's been great.
Now, there was a lot made on another network about your bringing in the gold accents to
Yeah.
Trumpify the Oval Office.
It needed a little life.
So you have the mantle and you have the cherubs from,
Right.
is that from Mar-a-Lago?
Yeah, that's actually, they're gold, all gold, look. And you know, it's angels. They say angels bring good luck. And we need a lot of luck in this country with what they've done over the last 4 years. So take a look. Do you know that little secret? I don't know if you're going to waste your time putting this on, but throughout the years, people have tried to come up with a gold paint that would look like gold, and they've never been able to do it.
Can't do it.
You've never been able, look at that look. You've never been able to match gold with gold paint. That's why it's gold. And this is very important.
Is he giving us a secret message there? There's a lot of talk about Fort Knox and what's going on. We know a lot of gold is being moved into the country. Is President Trump saying, hey, don't try to paint the gold bars or fake gold bars and put them in Fort Knox when Elon goes in and checks it all out? Don't try to trick us because we're beyond you because you can't fake gold paint? I don't know. Maybe. I like this tour of the Oval Office, though. I find it fascinating. You know, this was exactly something that I wanted to do with President Trump. Laura Ingraham stole it from me, but she did a great job here and really just let President Trump go because this is what he does best. And he likes showing this stuff off because he looks at the Oval Office as your office, too. He knows it represents America.
Proud of this Gulf of America. And in fact, Elon said to me, you know, we're landing in the Gulf of America. So he was saying, and he said it naturally. He said it so routinely. He said, yeah, the capsule, you know, is landing in the Gulf of America. So I called Elon, where is it dropping down? He said, Gulf of America. How cool is that, right?
What do you think all these presidents would think right now about
I think
the
they'd
state
be proud
of
of our country. I think a year ago they would have been disgraced by our country, and I think today they're proud of our country. This is the Resolute desk, by the way. I had that just redone by an unbelievable group. They do only the White House furniture. They do only very special. This is the Resolute desk. Many great presidents sat behind that desk, and many didn't. I mean, you know, they have 7. When you're president, they give you a choice of 7 desks. This is the one.
Why? Why did you want this?
Just like I like the history. You had Reagan, you had Kennedy. That was the famous one with John, who I knew very well, and he was a friend of mine. He was a great guy. He would have been maybe president someday. He would have been a real chance to be president. He was going to get into politics. He was actually a great guy. John. But remember when he was a young boy, the picture of him at the bottom of the desk.
Where's the Coke button?
It's right here. Everyone thinks that's
on
the
the desk?
nuclear. Everyone
here?
thinks that's the nuclear weapon. They think it's a nuclear weapon. They say if I press this, it's the end of the world.
Oh, And then there's like
And it doesn't
50,000.
seem to work out that way.
50.
Doesn't that look beautiful though over there? But to me, you know what looks beautiful? The Gulf of America. Look at that.
Which one's better? Which one?
Now I'll take the Declaration of Independence. I think so. Isn't that cool?
Could you imagine if that was the nuclear button just sitting out there? You go to hang the phone up, you accidentally hit it. Like it's not gonna be the nuclear button just like that. A little more protocols to that. But he's got a Coke button. That'll bring the Coke out. I'll tell you what, folks. It's been a good week. It's been a good week for President Trump. We're going to talk more about the deportation issues on the program tonight. We've got Dr. McCullough on the Real America's Voice show coming on tonight. There's a new strain of bird flu now. I'm a suspect of this. A brand new strain, like not even related to the current bird flu that we're talking about. They killed a whole bunch of other, like 40,000 birds in Missouri because of this thing. So we shall see. We shall see what that's about with Dr. McCullough, and it should be a good show tonight. So I hope you tune in to that. Stinchfield's Army rolls. Thanks to all of you. And folks, lastly, do not forget, GrantStinchfield.com. If you're watching on Rumble, please subscribe to the channel. So important for us, that subscription. You get notified when we come up live. That's great. GrantStinchfield.com. You can sign up for the email list there. And Stinchfield 1776 on just about all the social media platforms. So grateful for you all here. We'll see you tomorrow. Stinchfield's Army rolls. Thanks for watching, everybody.